What's growing on, gardeners? It's Saturday, December 30th, and another year is coming to an end here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. Are you a new gardener that is looking to begin a winter garden for the first time? Or maybe you are a more experienced gardener and you're looking for really easy to grow winter crops to add to the list? Well, today I'm going to share with you 5 winter crops that no winter or spring garden is complete without, because they are some of the easiest to grow crops out there.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and spread shop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Now, before I begin, I live in Zone 8B, North Carolina, and all of the crops that I'm going to list in this video can easily be grown pretty much unprotected all winter long in Zone 8 and a lot of mild Zone 7s as well. However, if you live in colder zones than I live, you can still grow most of these crops all winter long, but they will benefit from a little bit of protection, like a little cheap hoop house with a row cover like this. So down in the video description, I'm going to link to a playlist of the different ways that I build these hoop structures and protect my plants from cold. If you build a little structure like this, you can grow them deep into the winter, even in cold zones. The number one veggie that no winter or spring garden is complete without is kale, and I think kale is probably the easiest to grow of all of the leafy greens. Here in Zone 8, I have never had my kale take any damage, and I never protect it except for a freak 100-year event that we had back in January 2018, where we had back-to-back 8-degree nights and we never got above freezing during the day. When that happened, that burnt up some of the kale leaves, but I just peeled them back to the stems, and they still survived, and they all grew right back as soon as the temperatures warmed up again. Every year I grow 3 different types of kale in my garden. There's Red Russian, which you see right here and is probably the most cold hardy of all the varieties of kale. There's Lacinato kale, which is sometimes called Dino kale, which you see right here. This is often the most well-known and most popular varieties of kale. But my favorite variety of kale by far is the dwarf blue curly kale. Not only is it extremely cold tolerant, but for whatever reason it is also very heat resistant and the last variety of kale to bolt in my garden. And I think it has something to do with these really ruffled leaves that probably protect from both cold damage and the overabsorption of sunlight. And also because of these ruffled leaves, they tend to never get any problems with pests. My other varieties of kale tend to have problems with caterpillars and worms and whiteflies, but this is by far my most insect-resistant kale variety. So I've been slowly converting a lot of my kale over to this variety, and it is also one of my favorite varieties of kale to eat fresh. It is wonderfully tender and juicy. Now, the interesting thing about kale is it is a biennial. It doesn't flower and go to seed until its second season. So this kale that you see right here is actually 1 year old. It was planted last winter, and the kale that I predominantly harvest during the winter time is the 1 year old kale, because it's not going to flower and seed until the next spring or summer. So what I like to do actually is I plant new kale transplants every single winter, and I have a very minor harvest of them and only harvest a little bit of the leaves. Then throughout the spring and summer, the plants will continue to grow, but they tend to get a lot of pests like moths and cabbage worms and white flies, and they will actually damage the kale. So what I will do is I will strip them back, and you will get these long, basically naked stalks that will come back in the fall when the pest pressure decreases. So these kale, which will have a very highly developed root system, immediately come back in the cooler fall weather when the pests are gone, and I get big harvests of them. I pick off these plants several times every single week, and it just produces non-stop here in North Carolina. The kale plants that you see right here were actually started from seed in the fall, and they were planted in late fall. So this is going to be my dwarf blue curly kale that I'm actually going to harvest next winter. I stagger my harvest by a whole year. Yes, I will get a little bit of a harvest off of the leaves that you see right here, but overwhelmingly I'm going to mostly let them sit and let them mature, because I tend to harvest my kale on a delayed schedule. That's how I get the best production. When growing kale from seed, I recommend starting them in seed trays indoors, because they like to germinate at around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's just too cold this time of year in most climates in order to approximate those conditions. Now, in order to do this, you want to fill your seed trays with a potting mix of some type, and then leave them about ½ an inch shallow, and then simply pre-moisten them, because it's easier to work with pre-moistened mix. Then we will take our kale seeds with a chopstick, because a wet chopstick tip will make it very easy to grab the seed. And I will place 2 to 3 seeds in every individual cell, and that's because we want to overseed them all, because only around a little bit more than half of the seed will probably germinate. So if we put 3 in every single one, we can probably expect 2 of them to come up, and then once they reach about 3 inches in height and they get a couple sets of true leaves, we will simply thin them down to the strongest individual transplant. And then once all of the kale seeds have been placed, we're going to lightly cover them with about a 1/4 inch of potting mix. You want your kale seeds buried a 1/4 inch, so that will also leave about a 1/4 inch on top in order to hold water as well. And then finally, we will water them in, and indoors we can expect them to germinate anywhere within 7 to 14 days. And if you have a seedling heat mat and a thermostat, I recommend you use it and you set bottom heat somewhere between the 70 to 75 degree range. Veggie number 2 that is so easy to grow that it simply cannot be left out of your winter and spring garden are carrots. Now, when it comes to growing carrots, I'm pretty variety agnostic. I just go to a seed stand and I buy whatever the average length carrot is, that is the average number of days to maturity. And this year, this is the variety that I came up with that was sitting on the shelves at the store. The reason why carrots simply must be a part of your winter and early spring garden is twofold. Number one, a carrot's sugar content is inversely proportional to temperature. That means the colder the weather is that your carrots start to mature, the higher the sugar content it will have. The warmer the weather, the starchier the carrot would be. Simply put, carrots grown in the winter and the early spring are way sweeter and more delicious than carrots that mature in the warm weather in late spring and summer. And number two, carrots are some of the most cold hardy things that I've ever grown in my garden. When we got down to 8 degrees and back-to-back nights and that freak 100-year freeze back in January 2018, it didn't even phase the carrots. I've never found the cold tolerance of a carrot. I think it's probably somewhere around 0 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that, especially if you cover it. So they are just bulletproof in most winter climates. The challenge to growing carrots is that you can't start them from transplants. They are a root vegetable, so they need to be direct sown. So they are at the mercy of your soil temperatures. Now, carrots are going to germinate better in warmer soil temperatures, but as long as your soil is still workable, they will eventually germinate. They just may take 2 weeks. The other challenge with planting carrots is that the seed needs to be buried very shallow, only at about a 1/4 inch of cover. So they are pretty much surface sown, and the seeds are very small, so they are liable to be washed away by heavy rain. So you need to be careful in your planting methodology. Now, the way I like to sow carrots is I like to take a piece of rebar, like you see right here, and just roll it back and forth, and that will make a very shallow trench in order to sow your carrot seeds. And that is going to be a perfectly straight trench that is about a 1/4 inch deep. You may just have to use your finger in order to even it out just a little bit. Then we are going to take the very small carrot seeds that you see right here, and we are going to sprinkle it along the trench. We really want to make sure that we overseed everything, and we can thin our carrots later. The germination rate of carrots is going to be low, so it's always better to have way more seed and have way more little baby carrots come up than to have really spotty germination and have big holes in our rows. Now it's time to backfill the carrot seeds. Now, you could just backfill it with the soil that are in your beds, but what I have found is that this soil is very light and sandy, and it tends to wash away if we get very heavy rain. So what I do is I cover it with a little bit of pre-bagged potting soil, because that is very heavy in peat. And when peat moss gets wet, it tends to lock into place, so it is a lot harder to wash away. And I've gotten much better germination results doing that. You just have to make sure that after you press the peat down, you quickly and gently water it. That way the peat expands and it gets nice and heavy, and it locks all those carrot seeds into place. In order to further increase the germination rates of your carrots, one thing I've recommended in the past is to place a wooden board on top of your trench, because that will lock all of the carrot seeds seeds into place, and then you just water on top of the board and around the general area and keep it moist. However, some of you have mentioned that by placing a board on your garden soil like this, mealy bugs or pill bugs have taken up residence under the board. If you're having issues with that, you could also take something like agricultural fabric and you can lay it down in the area and then place some bricks or rocks on a location on the ends to weigh it down. But if you do that, you have to keep the agricultural fabric moist, so you need to water it every single day, but not too much. You don't want the soil to be saturated, you just want the area lightly moist. And this is what you can expect about 2 weeks after you plant your carrot seeds in terms of germination. One of the issues that many gardeners at high latitudes have growing food in the winter is even if their temperatures are mild enough, the sun is not strong enough and the days are not long enough in order to supply effective enough photosynthesis to the plants. Well, that's why I'm recommending veggie number 3, which is super easy to grow, and that is radishes. Radishes are some of the easiest things to grow in our winter gardens because they mature very quickly. They germinate in only about 5 to 7 days, and they're ready to harvest in as little as a month, sometimes even earlier. So if you live at a high latitude and sun is very weak, make sure you check the days to maturity that are on the package here. As you can see, the days to maturity of this variety is only 22 to 25 days. So the lower the days to maturity, the less they need strong sun. So look for those low numbers to be successful. Radishes are very cold hardy, but because they are a root crop, you want to keep the soil from freezing in order to be successful. If you live in a climate where the soil doesn't freeze, no problem. You can grow these freely all winter long. If your soil does freeze, that's when you want to build a little hoop structure like this and put a cloth over it. That way it holds in the heat of the sun all day and it will keep your soil from freezing. Now here in Zone 8, all I need is agricultural fabric. If you live in a cold zone, you may need to use greenhouse plastic. No problem. I will make sure to link to all of those things down in the video description. I have direct links where you can purchase these various different items. So right here, I already have a nice crop of radishes coming along, but I want to make another small planting in order to extend my harvests when these are all complete. So I'm going to place a series of holes about 2 inches away from each other, and then I'm going to place my radish seeds, and we want to sow them about 1/2 an inch deep. And then we're just going to cover them up, water them in, and we can expect these radishes to germinate in about 5 to 7 days. Veggie number 4 that you simply must grow in your winter and early spring garden are red leaf lettuces. And I'm specifically stating red leaf lettuces for a reason. When most of us think about lettuce, we think about the big heads of romaine lettuce that we find in the grocery stores. But the truth is, romaine is generally a fair weather plant. It does not do well with hard freezes. It can only take the lightest amount of frosts before it takes damage. For that reason, I actually grow my romaine in the middle of spring. They like the temperatures of late March, April, and May. They do not do well in the cold. And you can see this on this head of romaine right here. It was my one leftover head that I had growing underneath some milk jugs, and even protected underneath the milk jug greenhouse, it took some damage in the mid-20s that we got down to about 2 weeks ago, and you can see that it has some rotting and splitting along the veins of the lettuce from damage from the cold. And the head is also deformed and funny looking as a result. Red leaf lettuces with those curly ruffled leaves are way more cold hardy than your romaine types, and I've been experimenting with numerous varieties in my garden over the years, and for years I have had great success with the Marvel of 4 Seasons and the Red Sails varieties that you see right here. But this year I also took a gamble on another variety called New Red Fire, and I am very impressed so far. All of this lettuce that you see in this raised bed right here is the New Red Fire variety. And whereas that green head of romaine I just showed you was suffering from all kinds of deformities and some cold damage even when under protection, this New Red Fire variety is just thriving. It looks absolutely perfect. There's no deformations, there is no cold damage at all, and I will be harvesting this probably within the next 2 weeks. Now, a lot of these red leaf lettuces don't make very good heads. They're made to be direct sown in rows very tightly together in your garden, and then you'll come in with a pair of scissors and then you'll cut off the leaves that you need, hit them with a higher nitrogen fertilizer, and then they will grow back. We call this cut and come again style of harvesting. But this new red fire variety, you have the flexibility to either grow them in rows and harvest them as individual leaves, or you can let them form small heads. Now, I direct sowed these into my garden something like 6 weeks ago, and they are making really nice, tightly clumped heads, so I'm going to let them keep going. Whatever you want to do, if you want to grow a heading type or a row type, that is going to be up to your personal preference. A lot of these red leaf lettuces, though, do grow better in rows than as heads. So if you've failed growing lettuce in the past, try growing these super curly leafed red leaf types. They tend to grow best in the winter, and they do better with the weaker sun and the colder temperatures. And veggie number 5 may be the easiest to grow on the entire list, and that is the leek. The leek is part of the allium family, so it is in the same family as garlic, onions, and shallots, except for anything but maybe hardneck garlic. This is probably the most cold hardy on the list. Hardneck garlic would be number 1, then you'd have your leeks as the second most cold hardy. And what is great about this is truly something that you can grow 365 days a year, because you actually harvest it for the stem. That is what you eat. So it is basically agnostic to day length, unlike something like an onion and garlic, which has to be planted at very specific times of the year. So what I like to do with my leeks are, I like to sow a 6-pack of leek seed, and that is what you see right here. These are almost ready for transplant. You're going to sow these in seed trays, just like I showed you how to sow my kale. You want to let it germinate indoors, and they will be ready for transplant in about 8 weeks, and that is what you see right here. These are approaching the 8-week mark. So I like to have my leeks in all different versions of maturity. The leeks that you see right here are leftover leeks that I left standing from the summer. I have some leeks over here that are a couple of months behind them, and I have a few more small leeks planted over here. So when you stagger them a 6-pack at a time, you will make sure that you always have various leeks in some form, that you can always have some for harvest. Now here in Zone 8, North Carolina, I have been growing exclusively this King Richard variety of leek, and this is appropriate for all year planting here. This is more than cold hardy enough for my zone all winter, and it is more than heat tolerant enough for my summers. So if you're in Zone 8, Zone 9, Zone 7, this is probably a fantastic variety. Now, if you need a more cold hardy leek, you could grow something like the variety Blue Soleils, which is an heirloom leek. You can grow them all the way down, unprotected, out in Vermont, and have them stand all winter. If you want winter leeks in a very cold climate, what you would do is you would place your leek transplants out in late summer and then let them grow and have them mature in the middle of fall, and then you just let them sit in your garden all winter long. When they are mature, they will tolerate temperatures well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. They can even sit in snowpack, and you basically treat your outdoors like a giant refrigerator, and then you just come out and cut what you need when you need it. If you live in a desert climate, you may have to get yourself a more heat tolerant leek or place them under shade cloth in the summer to keep some of the sun off of them. One of the problems I've found with leeks is that people just don't know how to use them. Well, a leek is kind of like a cross between a shallot and green onions, and you can basically use them anywhere that you'd use an onion. They're incredibly versatile. So what you want to do is you want to go through your garden and find yourself a really nice thick boy, the thickest stem one that you can find, and then you're going to yank that guy out and you're going to cut off the roots. And then what you're going to do is you're going to basically cut off all the greenery hanging off, because what we want to use is we want to use the white part in the center. And that is what you see right here. This is the white part of the leek. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this inside, you're going to slit the top, you're going to wash everything out really nicely, and you're going to eat it between here and here, and you're going to chop that up finely, and you're going to saute that however you wish. So this is excellent in any kind of pasta dish, as a base for any kind of soups, stews, fried rice, pretty much anywhere where you would like a very mild onion flavor. That is basically what you would consider this, a mild onion. So it's incredibly versatile. So you're on YouTube right now, you can just type in anything like leek pasta or leek soup. There are countless things you can use this for. As many things as you can use onions and garlic for, you can use a leek for. And that right there are 5 of the easiest veggies that you can grow in a winter or early spring garden. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you have any questions about the veggies featured in this video, please ask the questions down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer those questions. And down in the video description, I will drop a link to that playlist that has all of my hoop house and row cover builds in case you need a little bit of cold protection. While you're down in the video description, check out my link for my Amazon storefront. It has everything I use in real life in my garden, and I'll place some direct links for things like frost blankets and agricultural fabric if you need some cold protection. And while you're down there, check out my spread shop link as well for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
We're having a freak winter storm right now with all types of severe weather and tornado watches and everything. And we actually had to put Dale in his thunder shirt because it was so windy all day. All of the wind noise was making him really nervous. But he's been in this shirt for a few hours and he's doing so much better. If you have a dog that struggles with loud noises or with fear of storms and things like that, really recommend this thunder shirt. It hugs them very tightly and it's been really good for Dale. So if you're interested in something like this, I'll place a link down in the video description. It was a really great buy and it's really calmed them down a lot. So if you have a dog that struggles with loud noises and things like that and anxiety, I really recommend it. He's such a good boy. Look at this good boy. He's so handsome.